The joy of the Lord will be my strength. I will not falter, I will not faint. He is my shepherd, I am not afraid. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord will be my strength. He will uphold me all of my days. I am surrounded by mercy and grace. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord will be my strength. I will not waver, walking by faith. He will be strong to deliver me safe. The joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord is my strength. The joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord, the joy of the Lord is my strength. One step at a time, dear Savior, I cannot take any more. The flesh is so weak and hopeless, I know not what is before. One step at a time, dear Savior, till faith grows stronger in thee, One step at a time, dear Savior, till hope grows stronger in me. One step at a time, dear Savior, oh, guard my faltering feet. Keep hold of my hand, dear Savior, till I my journey complete. One step at a time, dear Savior, till faith grows stronger in thee, One step at a time, dear Savior, till hope grows stronger in me. One step at a time, dear Savior, thou knowest all of my fear. One word from thy heart, dear Savior, and heaven's mansions appear. One step at a time, dear Savior, till faith grows stronger in thee, One step at a time, dear Savior, till hope grows stronger in me. One step at a time, dear Savior, till faith grows stronger in thee, One step at a time, dear Savior, till hope grows stronger in me.
I'm not used to being on television. Got to wait for the director to tell me go. Am I good? Well, welcome. I wasn't sure, Marcia and I weren't sure how many people would show up tonight, so thank you for being here. And for those of you at home, I don't know, how many do we have at home? 2, 1. Oh, one's you? If we go to 0, I guess we can cut off the live feed, but just stay here. So we do have the microphone. If somebody wants to ask a question, Cliff's going to pass it around. And we've got tissue, well, it's paper towels from the bathroom that if you don't want to touch the microphone after someone else touches it, you can take a paper towel and do that. It's been a long time since we've had in-person class on Wednesday night, since the first part of 2020. And that's interesting, to say the least, and unfortunate and sad that we're having to go through what we're going through. But hopefully tonight we'll start a lesson on, I'm calling it Uncharted Territory, but it's actually based on the children of Israel and the Exodus. Because who else was in greater uncharted territory than the children of Israel when they were coming out of the land of Egypt? Even though that was, the land of Egypt had become a very oppressive place for them. When they got from that place out into the wilderness, crossing the Red Sea and all of that, they really were in uncharted territory. And a lot of things happened while they were on their journey. And so we're going to try to we're going to do some textual study, but this is also going to be mainly, I guess, textual topical, I guess we'll call it, because we're going to do some textual study, but also I really want to pull some principles from this. I told Dana, I said I wrote down a really cutting edge term. We want to pull some life hacks. I don't know what a life hack is, but I think it means principles or something like that. Anybody know what a life hack is? It's a cheat?
It's an easy way to do something that you normally do every day.
Oh, okay.
Like life hacks in the kitchen, things that make doing cooking and stuff easier.
So maybe this should not be called a spiritual hack, but if it's an easy way of doing something, since spiritual life is not that easy.
Is put your pizza that you went on your heated passenger seat so it's warm whenever it gets on.
I gotcha. Okay.
$40,000 hack.
So trying to be efficient. Is it just you still on? Yeah. Then we're not going to pass the mic around. If somebody else pops on, we'll start passing the mic around.
There's one other person.
Besides you?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then we'll pass it around. But we'll start after. So putting the pizza on the heated passenger seat so it stays warm when you're going home. Okay. All right. Yeah. We could probably make a spiritual application to that somehow. I don't know exactly how, but we could try. So just tell me this. How many of you believe that right now, in the world that we live in, we truly are in uncharted territory to a greater or lesser degree? Because I've had some people say, oh yeah, absolutely. And then I've had some people say, well, no, this kind of thing has happened. It's just kind of cyclical, and so this is not really all that new. It's happened. It just hasn't happened to us. There was a pandemic, 100 years ago, 103 years ago, the Spanish flu. And so it lasted, 2 years? More or less. Actually, parts of it lasted about 4 years, but about 2. The worst part of it was about 2 years long. And a lot of the same things that happened during the Spanish flu are happening here. Have you heard of the term barefaced? Anybody said, they're a bald-faced or barefaced liar? So you know where that came from? Came from the Spanish flu pandemic of 1917, 1918, because there were people that were protesting having to wear, of all things, a mask. And so they didn't want to wear a mask, and so they were protesting wearing a mask, and they were called bald-faced or barefaced. So there you go. There's that little factoid that means absolutely nothing that my brain is full of, Dana says. Just like all the words to the song Amish Paradise by Weird Al Yankovic. I know all of those. So I will sing it for you at some point, but not tonight, okay? So How many of you think we're in uncharted territory? Let me see your hands again. Most. For us, yeah. But so Troy didn't raise his hand, so I'm going to pick. So why do you think we are or not?
Yeah, if we qualify it and say this generation dealing with this widespread pandemic, then I would say, well, yes, for this generation we are. For the United States, no. For the world, no.
Yep.
But because sometimes we don't learn from our mistakes, or we don't remember things, if you don't study history, you're doomed to be repeated, that kind of stuff. So for this generation, yes. But I could also say the same thing with the greatest generation.
Yep.
They went through some uncharted territories that we've never had to deal with, but yet, could that happen again?
Yep.
Well, sure.
It could.
So if we qualify it and say it for this generation, okay. But other than that, no, I don't get too worked up over it.
Yeah. I mean, it's absolutely true. Bless you. This is what we're dealing with, but the way that we look at things is what we're dealing with, right? We don't worry about what happened, in 1917, 1918. I mean, we think about it now because we're kind of dealing with something similar, but really, I don't care that much what happened to those people back then. I care about what's happening to us right now and how it's affecting our lives and our country and our economy and our world. And so, but Troy's right. If we would have learned some things from the 1917 pandemic and learned that there are certain principles from that we should have brought forward to this today. And I have a theory. I don't think this is the last time we're going to have a pandemic, and I think they're probably going to get closer together. That's just me, as a medical professional telling you guys what I think about this. But I do think that there will be other pandemics that'll probably be variants of this SARS-CoV-2.
I was just gonna say, I think because of technology, we are in uncharted waters as far as dealing with it, because we have information at the minute that people have never had before, and we're not handling it very well.
Yeah, I think that's true. I think technology can help us possibly as well on developing a vaccine sooner. But whether we agree with this term as applicable to us today, we'll qualify it as our generation and what's going on right now. I think we are in uncharted territory in a lot of ways. How many of you think that Northridge is in somewhat of uncharted territory as a congregation? He raised his hand on that one. Why would we think that? Why would we think that Northridge is in uncharted territory? Anybody?
We never learned we had services before. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. I can't remember not having services other than just, for ice storm or, weather or something like that. But not over the long haul like we've, really had to look at it differently now. Any other things other than just not being able to meet like we were used to that has kind of taken us into uncharted territory as a church? Wayne?
On the positive side, we can attend services without attending services.
That's right.
We've had the ability to see the broadcast streaming.
I had one of our saints tell me that he loved attending services because he could sit in his underwear. So, I guess there's a benefit to that, but not one that I necessarily care to do. But I guess if that's how you want to attend and that's the way you need to do it, okay. So.
On the other hand, though, people are getting comfortable with that, and I think it's going to keep them away.
Yep.
It goes on too long. When you're not going to have an event with our brothers and sisters, I think it becomes too comfortable just to stay home, because I can
Yeah.
punch my clock and still be okay and be head to head with everybody else, but not having to take the time out to come. I think it's hurting us.
Absolutely. It's hard to be the church if you're not ever together with the church. And then when you are together here with the church and you really can't give somebody a hug, or, I got to give Lori an elbow bump, or something like that, I mean, it's not the same, is it? I mean, we have a very warm church. We have a very loving congregation that wants to have that closeness. And so it's hard whenever, you're worshiping from home and you really want that other part of that relationship. And I think that's what plays into the church being the church, because we have that fellowship, we have that closeness, we have that communion with one another. More than just what we do with the Lord's table, but that communion, that community that we have together. I think that we will see whenever we kind of come back as a group that there will have been some people that we have allowed to just kind of slip away. And I was having breakfast with the Fainting Goats the other Saturday morning, and we actually talked about that. Does everybody know who the Fainting Goats are? Fainting Goats are Troy and Donnie and Jimmy Barnett. They call themselves the...
There's about 8 or 9 of them now.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, if y'all don't know what fainting goats are, Google it. A lot of people don't understand what a fainting goat is. Oh, a fainting goat.
Fainting.
Goat.
Yeah.
Yeah, Gary Wright.
Gary Wright, yeah.
We're trying to go around and help people and
They-
do some work projects. Well, the very first one we went on, Gary Wright had a heart attack. So it's like, if we overwork too much or you scare us, we will faint. So we just call ourselves the fainting.
The Fainting Goats.
Yeah, if you'll Google
Yeah.
it, just put fainting goat and watch some of the videos, you'll understand why we call ourselves the fainting goats.
I have asked to be an adjunct member of the Fainting Goats because I can't come every single time they do it, but I can come a lot. So, all right. So this is what I want to do. We're going to start in Exodus chapter 1, but before you open your Bibles, I don't want you to open your Bibles yet. I want you to tell me everything that you can think of about the Exodus story, and I'm going to write them down on this whiteboard. Everything that you can think of about the Exodus story. Big things, big points. What's that? Okay, so I'm talking about events.
Clothes didn't wear out. That's big.
Let's back up more than that.
Okay,
Moses didn't really want to go.
all right. If you're going to start in the book of Moses, you could even back up before that, right? So, what about Moses being born? If you started there, what other steps would come into your brain after Moses being born and being placed in the reeds?
10 plagues.
Plagues, okay.
Moses, the burning bush.
So, go back more. Give me some more toward the beginning. So, after Moses was found in the bulrushes, the reeds, what happened?
Raised in the Pharaoh's palace.
Okay. How do you spell Pharaoh? Pharo. Pharo. Close enough, yeah, we'll call it good. Raised by Pharaoh's daughter. Now, was he completely raised by Pharaoh's daughter?
He was nursed by his mother.
Okay. He was nursed by his mom at daughter's request, right?
He had an older brother and sister.
Satan what?
Satan paid for his raising.
Okay. What else? Basically, he was raised by Pharaoh and Pharaoh's household, and Pharaoh was being oppressive to the children of Israel, I think. Is that what you were going for, Wayne?
Yeah.
Okay.
They thought he was going to be killed, and the very thing they were afraid of was the very thing that protected him.
Okay.
He killed a man and ran away.
There you go. All right. What else? What else? Oh, there's a bunch.
He was 80 years old.
How old are you, Larry? Yeah.
I'm not 80 yet.
Well, I know that. I'm just asking. 70 what?
Yeah.
70? Upper or lower end of 70? Okay. So take heart. Moses was about your age whenever he led the children out of Israel. So
Well, he had divine intervention.
all right. I don't think I have enough handouts for everybody. I think I only printed 10 because I wasn't sure. That's how optimistic I was when I'll give one to my wife and let her print some more. Do you mind to make some more? It's up. Look up under the file cabinet. It's up there on a little sticky note. I think it's 7519. Is what I think it is. Okay. Anybody not get one? I have one extra. So I told Marcia, I said I'm probably going to have a slideshow, and I said, man, I was very ambitious. I did good to get a handout done. Okay, so you guys told me a lot of details about the Exodus story. Now, you guys kind of see what those are. Those shouldn't be too hard to remember. I don't even have an eraser. Yeah, if you don't mind, because I need to write some more stuff down. Should have just gotten 2 whiteboards. Yeah, everybody had shared, or so there was enough. So we killed part of a tree, unfortunately. So okay, so now what I want you to think about after you've listed all of these things, you can look at your Bible if you want to now. Exodus chapter 1 is where we're going to be. So after all these kind of details about the Exodus story, now I want principles or truths or spiritual life hacks from the Exodus story. I like that phrase, so I'm going to keep on using it. So, and don't tell me that Moses put his pizza in the passenger heated seat to keep it warm while he was going to the promised land. So. So what would be? Yeah, I mean that's a fact, but what's the principle behind the fact? Why wasn't he killed? Because of.
The midwives were being brave and didn't
Yep.
kill the babies like they were
Thank you.
told to.
Because why? Okay. That's a good one. So Amy said, one of the things that she said was that God didn't, or that Pharaoh did not kill Moses when he was in the bulrushes. And then it went on, we progressed from there, and that's because God was going to use.
I think the midwives said that they could see that he was special, I forget how they phrased it. That he was,
God was going to use Moses. Did Moses know that God was going to use him even when he was a younger man? Younger than Larry? Do you?
Yeah, we have no reason to think so.
No. So tell me something else that Moses did that could give you a truth about Moses himself. What did he do whenever he was being raised in Pharaoh's house?
he still knew that he was a Jew,
Okay.
that he knew he was a Hebrew.
Okay.
And well, the incident where he killed the guard,
Okay.
he knew instinctively, if not, that he was to protect his people.
Okay. Yep. So he knew. But what did that bring to light about him whenever he saw this Egyptian mistreating this Israelite, and then he killed him? Actually, the scriptures say he did what before he killed the guy? Does anybody remember? He looked around to see if anybody was watching. Then he killed the Egyptian, and then he did what? He buried him in the sand. So he was kind of worried about getting caught, right? But what does that tell you about his character?
He had an anger problem.
Okay?
That's why he broke up the tablets too, and he struck the rock.
I'm going to put that he was flawed. Okay. So let's look in the last part of Genesis first. Genesis chapter 50. We'll get some more of these here in just a second. Somebody want to read? And
The whole chapter?
no, I'll tell you which verse is here. Let's do 15. First of all, let's just do 15 to 21. We'll do that section first.
When Joseph's brothers saw that their father was dead, they said, "What if Joseph holds a grudge against us and pays us back for all the wrongs we did him?" So they sent word to Joseph, saying, "Your father left these instructions before he died. This is what you are to say to Joseph. I ask you to forgive your brothers the sins and the wrongs they committed in treating you so badly. Now, please forgive the sins of the servants of the God of your father." When the message came to him, Joseph wept. His brothers then came and threw themselves down before him. "We are your slaves," they said. But Joseph said to them, "Don't be afraid. Am I in the place of God? You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children." And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them.
Okay, so there's a really big principle from those verses 19 through 21 that Joseph said to his brothers. What is it? It may not be as evident as maybe it seems to be in my mind, but what's a huge principle in those three verses as you see it?
God was in control even though there were bad, evil things happening.
Okay?
It's interesting that everything that looked negative turns out positive. Pharaoh was killing the
Yep, I think that's a big one. God's in control, and He's sovereign. I don't know how you spell sovereign either. S-O-R-V-E-R-I-E-G-N. That's close enough. What does it mean for God to be sovereign?
He's always in charge of every molecule of the universe.
Yep. And everything's going to work out according to His will, right? Because He is in control. And while all the details, as we look at them in this day and time, we're looking around saying, why would God do this and why would God do that? Why did God allow this to happen? Why is God allowing this pandemic or this person to get sick or maybe this person to pass away? We ask a lot of those questions, don't we? One of the things that I'm trying to learn myself is that God looks at the long game. God looks from the perspective of eternity, doesn't He? When God looks at what was going to happen with the children of Israel, God was looking at that from the perspective of eternity. He wasn't looking at it from the perspective of even a decade or 2 decades or 100 years. He was looking at it over millennium of time, starting with Abraham, and then how this was all going to play out over time. In fact, He told Abraham, was it Jacob? He said, don't be afraid to go to Egypt, right? I think it was Jacob. Because Jacob, was kind of hanging back in the home place, and he told Jacob, don't be afraid to go to Egypt. Is that right?
Yeah.
And so, because he said, through this process, I'm going to make a mighty nation of you. It's kind of interesting to me, and I'm going to point something out here in a little bit. I know Cliff prefers the New American Standard translation. I never was used to that. I always used the New International Version, but the New American Standard has some really good thoughts with regard to some things, some principles from this passage. And so we see that Joseph does not give his brothers in kind to what they gave to him, right? In Genesis chapter 50. He says, you meant it for evil, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Now, I'm not going to give that away yet. So then don't be afraid. I will provide for you and your children. And he reassured them and spoke kindly to them. And then Joseph dies, okay? Joseph died at the age of 110. And they were concerned. Obviously, his brothers were concerned. They were not sure what was going to happen because after Joseph died, he was their connection to Pharaoh, right? And so Joseph, the brothers are a little bit concerned, but they actually go to Pharaoh and say, hey, we need to, actually, I'm getting the story mixed up now. They took Jacob back and buried him, didn't they? Help me.
They took Jacob back
And Joseph wanted to be buried in the promised land as well. Yep. So now let's go to Exodus chapter 1. Let's look at the first 7 verses first. So somebody probably knows this. How many years transpired from Exodus chapter 1 through Exodus chapter 7? Do you know how many years transpired just in those 7 verses? 7 verses.
400,
Yeah, right in there. 430, 400, 430, 450. And so in those first 7 verses, we have about 400 and something years of history that pass. Somebody want to read the first 7 verses of Exodus chapter 1? What translation are you reading from? Okay. So it's interesting that so much time transpires and is compressed in just this little bitty short period of time. Now, during these 400 years, were the Israelites, you'll know the answer if you read a little bit further down chapter 1, but during these 400 plus years, were the Israelites being oppressed by the Egyptians as far as we know at this point in time? As far as we know, they weren't. Because in the very next verse, in verse 8, it says what? There was a new king that arose that did not know who Joseph was. And so this king, who do they think it is, Cliff? Is this Ramses I? Okay. So they don't really know, but this new king is the one who starts to oppress the Israelites in Egypt, and he puts them at hard labor. But if you look back in Genesis 50, where Joseph said, "You meant this for evil, but God intended it for good, so that we could save many lives." But how many lives were they saving right here in verse 5? 70. So do you think that's the number of lives that Joseph was talking about that God was going to save? That's 70 is a lot, right? I've got 9 grandkids, and I think that's a lot, okay? Especially when they're all over at my house at the same time. So, like they're going to be this weekend. So I got to find some place to go. You got a project this weekend? Okay, all right. I may be helping you. So, but 70 people are a lot. But I don't think that's what Joseph was talking about. I think Joseph knew that God looks at the big picture. He looks at the long game. God looks at what's going to happen for his purposes generations and generations and generations to come. And so 430 years, they start out with 70 people, and then as you read down through there, it says the Israelites in verse 7 were fruitful and multiplied greatly and became exceedingly numerous. I think Larry's translation goes on to say extremely powerful, exceedingly strong. The New American Standard actually is where it says that they were exceedingly powerful. I think is what it says. Mighty. Exceedingly mighty. Yeah, exceedingly mighty. So here you are. How many do you think there were, Cliff, Israelites at this point in time? Some people say millions. Okay. But hundreds of thousands maybe? Thousands? Hundreds? Less than 70? Yeah. You could grow a fair amount in 400 years. Okay. So we'll just say a bunch. Yeah, they were worried about it because who lived to the north of the Egyptians at this point in time? Does anybody know? Wild Bill? Oh, the Hittites? Yeah. Yeah, the Hittites lived to the north of the Egyptians at this point in time. And if you think strategically, you have this group of people that you're oppressing within your own country, and then you've got a country to the north that's pretty powerful too. And if those two band together, yeah, you could have a problem, right? I mean, you would have to expect that Pharaoh would be thinking about those kinds of things. And so you read on down in Exodus, and we see that he put slave masters over them in verse 11 to oppress them with forced labor, and they built store cities for him, Pithom and Ramses, but it says the more they were oppressed, the more they multiplied and spread. So the Egyptians came to dread the Israelites and worked them ruthlessly. They made their lives bitter and hard. their lives bitter with hard labor and brick and mortar and with all kinds of work in the fields. And in all their hard labor, the Egyptians used them ruthlessly. So, God was going to use Moses. He knew that. That's why he was saved, right? What was going on whenever his mother placed him in the basket and put him in the bulrushes? Why did she do that? Save his life from what? Yeah, the edict Pharaoh said, kill all the male children. They didn't do that. And then he goes to the midwives. Actually says throw all the male children in the Nile. And then he goes to the midwives and says, hey, whenever these Israelite women start having male children, we need to make sure they get, they're killed, or you need to let us know. And they didn't. And they said, they have babies really, really fast, so they're not like Egyptian women. And so they saved a bunch of the male babies by doing that. So God was going to use Moses. God knew his people. I want to ask this. So in the 400 and something years that they were living in Egypt and things were going pretty good, do you think God was doing something with them at that point in time? I think he was preparing them.
Ask that question again, please, Mike.
In that 430 years, when things were going pretty good in Egypt, before the new Pharaoh came in, whoever he was, what was God doing with those people?
He was letting them have a much larger population than they probably would have in the Palestine area.
Okay. Was that in a sense preparation for what was to come? So that they could take the land? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I think he was actually preparing his people, and I think that when we look at kind of some of the things that we're going to see as we move down through here, that God was actually even then affecting his will when things were good. So yeah, he told the midwives first to kill the male children, and then that didn't work. So he says just throw every male child into the Nile River is what he wanted to happen. So some of the things, I wrote down 10 things. I think I have them on your list there. These are not special in any way. And some of them you guys wrote down. But this is what I wrote down. Principles from the Exodus story. First thing I wrote down is that God is in control even when he appears he is not. What do you think the Israelites felt whenever they had kind of enjoyed many centuries of I don't know if it's prosperity, but comfort, even living in the land of Egypt, because there was this relationship that had been there with Joseph and Joseph's descendants that had been maintained over time. And now, whoever this was, this Pharaoh that came up that didn't abide by those relationships or care about those relationships anymore, starts becoming worried about these people and starts oppressing them and starts putting their lives, and it says their lives were very bitter at that point in time. Do you think the United States has gone through any kind of a cycle like that? Maybe not 400 years of always being good, but we've had a pretty good run with regard to the economy recently, haven't we? I mean, up until the first part of this year. Oil was doing pretty good. Not great, but doing okay. The economy was doing good. I work for a company, Boeing, and Boeing was doing really good last year. Really, really good. Last year, about this time, Boeing stock was about $400+ a share. I looked at it today, it's $150 a share. So Boeing's not doing that well, and it's because things can turn on a dime. You have some problems with an aircraft, and some bad things happen, and that can change your world in a heartbeat. It really can. The COVID-19 pandemic comes in. How many of you can honestly say it has not affected your life at all? Even if you don't believe that it's a real thing, and some people are skeptical that it's not a real thing. But is there anyone in this room that would say that it hasn't affected them, even no matter what you feel about it or think about it? It's affected everyone, and probably in a very profound way, to one degree or another. But God's in control. Yeah, they have to. They have to. Nobody's flying. And when you work for an airplane company like I do, and they're not building airplanes, Yep. It's, and I think I don't want to be gloom and doom, but I think it'll probably get worse before it gets better. But God is in control even when it appears He isn't. I believe that God was preparing the Israelites, and I believe that God prepares people for adversity. How many of you have experienced adversity in your life? How many of you are experiencing adversity in your life right now? Everybody, to one degree or another. I'm looking around. I know some stories from some people here, and I think everybody's had to deal with adversity at some point in their life, and some very, very profound adversity. But I think that God prepares His people for adversity. The other thing that I wrote down, just thinking about the Exodus story, and these are some of the principles that we're going to try to uncover and unpack as we kind of move through certain parts of this story. That's why I say it's going to be textual, topical as we move through it, is that God will reveal the right leader or leaders for His purposes. God will reveal those. I believe that. I believe that Northridge is in a spot right now where we're trying to identify how God is moving within us, and how are we supposed to respond to that? How do we deal with that? I think that this may be something that's kind of touchy, but you think about a lot of the things that have gone on with our congregation from when a lot of the people that we love that went and started a new congregation, Mission Road, from the thing that happened with Matt Curran whenever he left, thing that happened with Mark Webb, right? COVID-19, Brandon resigning from the pulpit. That's a momentous event.
Some you don't even want to mention.
No. But I would say that God, through even just the last few years, has been trying to prepare Northridge for adversity. I believe that. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I think it could get worse even at Northridge before it gets better with regard to our numbers and things like that. But if we believe that God is in control, should we really be worried about that? I'm going to share something that Troy said to me that's resonated with me since he said it, because I was the one that was making the statement, and I'll just tell you, I've made the statement several times. I really believe that Northridge is probably dying. I've said that many times. And Troy said, I don't buy that. I don't believe it. And I had to go back home after he said that and say, you know what? I have a bad attitude. I need to think differently about that, and I don't need to say that anymore. So thank you for that. God will reveal the right leader. And then right after that, I wrote, and the leaders that He reveal will be less than perfect. Was that Moses? Didn't God reveal Moses and Aaron? Were Moses and Aaron, were they perfect guys?
Ken, Mark shared something with me. Everybody holds up Ken Markham as a great missionary. He shared with me that they went to Guatemala to begin with, and he crashed and burned wrong thing.
Yeah. Moses, God used a murderer in Moses to lead his children out of the land of Egypt. Now, once they got out of the land of Egypt into the wilderness, they weren't real happy about that and they wanted to go back. Isn't that kind of the way we are too? And we'll talk about that more as time moves along in these classes. But I believe that God will reveal the right leader, and that whoever those leaders that rise up to lead, they're going to be flawed. And we as a church have got to be willing to give a greater measure of grace, because someone or certain people are trying to do the right thing, but they're going to not do it the way that they ought to do it as they always should. Here's another one. God uses unholy rulers to push His will and His purpose, right? Yeah. So think about, Tim Smith, I laughed about this off and on all day today. Danny was reading on Facebook. Tim Smith, he was the preacher at Lakeview for a long time. He put about the debate last night, he said to him, it was like two old men in the nursing home fighting over a game of dominoes. And I thought, of all the quotes I have heard about the debate, that's probably a good description. He said it looked like two old men fighting over a game of dominoes. But you know what? I have worried a lot about this election. And then as I started looking at this and looking at some of this, honestly, I told Dana yesterday, I said, it doesn't matter. God is going to use whatever leader is in the White House for His purposes. God will do that. And it may not look like that God is doing that, but God is going to do that, because God used Pharaoh, who arguably was the most powerful guy in the world at the time, with Moses to effect his will. And Moses succumbed eventually to the power of God, didn't he? Now, he didn't stay there for long, but he did. And so whoever winds up in the White House is going to be subject to the power and the sovereignty of God. We'll just put it that way. God's people will act in unrighteous ways, even toward one another. Did the children of Israel band together and be a cohesive group of people as they were traveling through the wilderness and as they were leaving Egypt? Was that kind of what characterized them all the time? Any of the time? Maybe part of the time? They fought the whole time. If it wasn't one thing, it was in another. They kept saying, let's at least go back to Egypt where we had something to eat or we had water to drink. They couldn't see the blessings. They could not see the blessings of God as they were moving along through the wilderness. And they were right there in front of them. Let me ask you, I'll tell you how I'd feel. When I'm driving to Oklahoma City every day, if there were this big white pillar of cloud that were there right in front of my car the whole way, would I be paying attention to that? I want to say yes. Isn't that what they had? And at night, this big ball of fire that was there all the time? Would I be paying attention to that as the ever-present power of God and ever-present presence of God? As a indication of that? Would I be thinking about that? I want to say yes. But human nature says that after a period of time, I would not be paying attention to that. I'd be, listening to Weird Al Yankovic instead of paying attention to the pillar that's in front of me and God's presence. God's people will act in unrighteous ways even toward each other. We've experienced that here in Northridge. People acting in unrighteous ways toward one another. Paul says you better stop biting and devouring one another, or eventually you're going to consume each other. This is the time when we need to band together as a church. This is the time when we need to pull together and treat each other the way that God treats us so that the world out there in Shawnee can see the way that our love resonates within this place. And then we won't have to worry about whether we have enough people, to keep the lights on or that kind of thing, because people will come here because they want to be a part of this. This next one that I put, adversity never ends. Adversity never ends. I think we are always dealing with adversity at some point, and to some greater or lesser degree. I don't think adversity ever ends. Satan is always active and working. And so Satan is going to try to work through whatever little or big adversity in your life to distract you from doing the things that God wants you to do. We already talked about this. When God looks at the long game, He looks at the big picture. He has the perspective of eternity. I think you see this as the principles of just the story of the Exodus, is that trusting in God brings blessings, and not trusting in God brings pain and heartache. I will tell you, as an elder at this congregation, and I'm going to be pretty transparent in these classes because I think it's really important for you to understand what the elders talk about and things that we're struggling with right now. But I think one of the things that I struggle with as an elder is that we don't always rely on God to help us go in the direction that we need to go. We think that we can just do it ourselves. We think that we can fix it ourselves. And that's not the way to be. That's why I was so thankful that there were a good group of people that showed up that Sunday night to pray together. That is the way to move forward. It's amazing to me that it took 59 years of my life to figure that one out. That's why, and I apologize. I told Troy, I said, when I said what I said on Sunday, I said, we're going to try something different. We're going to pray. But sometimes I think prayer is an afterthought, even in our own lives. Prayer is an afterthought. And the last thing I put was God's will prevails. God's will prevails. So I want to, got 5 minutes left. I want to leave you with the overarching theme that we're going to come back to over and over again. That's a principle from a book that the elders recently read called Canoeing the Mountains. And it's about moving through uncharted territory. It's a book about leadership, and it's a good book. Got a lot of good principles. But 3 things that we're going to come back to over and over again during this study. And that is that when you're in uncharted territory like the Israelites were and like we are today, you got to let go. You got to let go. The Israelites kept wanting to go back to Egypt. They have to let go of that. They had to let go of that. We have to let go of who Northridge used to be. We have to. And we have to understand who Northridge is now and who Northridge needs to be for God today, not who we used to be. We can live in the past forever, so we have to let go. The next thing is we have to learn as we go. Got to learn as we go. Because there's no playbook for where we are. Well, hey, I'm actually wrong about that. There is a playbook, right? There is a playbook. We've got it. We've got the scriptures. We've got the playbook. Sometimes we think we don't have any answers for what's going on right now. And we've got all the answers. We've got every answer we need. We've got every answer that we could ever want, and then some. So we've got to let go, and then we've got to learn as we go to determine who Northridge is going to be in this community moving forward. And then the last thing, and I think this is the most important, you got to keep going no matter what. You got to determine the right spiritual path for us as individual Christians, followers, disciples, and then we have to keep going in that spiritual direction no matter what. I was listening to a song. Dana said this is a Christian song. I heard it on the pop radio. But listen to these words, and we'll be done. It's by a guy named Matt Kearney, I think is his name. You might know, you might not. The song is called Closer to Love. And it says, she got the call today, one out of the gray, and when the smoke cleared, it took her breath away. She said she didn't believe it could happen to me. I guess we're all one phone call from our knees. We're going to get there soon. If every building falls and all the stars fade, we'll still be singing this song, the one they can't take away. We're going to get there soon. She's going to be there too, crying in her room, praying, Lord, please come through. We're going to get there soon. Oh, it's your light. Oh, it's your way. You pull me out of the dark just to shoulder the weight. Isn't that what God does? He pulls us out of that darkness, but He doesn't take away the burden, does He? He gives us the ability to go through with that burden on our shoulders. You pull me out of the dark just to shoulder the weight, crying out now from so far away, but you pull me closer to love. You pull me closer to love. The way that Northridge is going to be the church that it needs to be is to let God pull us closer to love. And I'll end on that. Thank you for your time. Let's have a quick prayer before we close out. I keep forgetting to pray. We need to pray. Father, thank you for the blessings that you give us, and forgive us for not being cognizant of them. Forgive us for not being aware of them, and for complaining, being ugly with one another. Because, Lord, we know that's not who you are, and that's not how you treat us, and that's not how you want us to treat one another, and that's not how we are supposed to conform to the image of your Son. Lord, help us to be disciples. Help us to be true followers. Help us to become mature in the faith so that we're not tossed about like a small boat on a lot of big waves, but that we can chart a course that's always pointed toward you. We may get off course occasionally, Lord. We may go the wrong direction. But, Lord, help us always keep the bow of our boat pointed always toward you. Thank you for the story of your deliverance of your people from Egypt and bondage and heartache and bitterness and turmoil. And even though they were taken into that wilderness where they thought things were a whole lot worse than that place that they had come from, thank you for bringing them to the promised land, and thank you for helping us to try to understand that we're going to get there soon. That it's about going to heaven. It's not about who wins the election in November in the United States. Bless us, Lord. Bless this church. Give us wisdom and discernment. Forgive us. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.